Good morning, good morning, good morning. Saturday, it's spring, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. We're doing Property Avenue WA. I'm TV, he's Oscar D'Souza, and we're here for your avenue to matters property in West Australia. We've got a range of different topics to have a chat about. There's a few different perspectives. And of course, I know it's Father's Day tomorrow, but I reckon it's more like Father's Day weekend. So we might just touch on that and the values of not just property, but the values of how important life is and how important our dads are and how important family is. So we might just be a little bit philosophical today, not just all about property, but as we always say every week, we're asking you to send your questions. Doesn't matter what it is. It may not be what we're talking about right at this minute, but if it's something about property and you've got something on your mind, you want to have ask a question, please do so, because we're here to discover the answers. We're not suggesting we're the experts in everything, but what we don't know, or what we might be able to give you a bit of a direction, we may be able to give you a bit of a hint. We may have had some experience ourselves. Between the two of us, we've been involved in the world of real estate and property and finance over a lengthy period of time. So we've got a few years up our sleeve between the two of us. And, of course, one's older than the other. You choose which one it is. But yeah, so that's it. We look forward to you playing a part, and that's what it's all about. OD, great to see you. How was your week,
mate? Really, really good. A good week. Hey, I'm surprised though you forgot to mention it in your opening spiel. What number episode is this?
I can't believe I missed that. It's episode 20. That's a milestone.
It's a monster, mate. It's an absolute 100% hats off to you. This is. Who knows where the show goes from here? And we discussed some feedback off air just before, but this is the way that big things start. And this might not be a big thing for the future, or maybe it will be. Who knows? But there was a good discussion off air as to where this all might go. And it all started with your idea, and it all started with your passion for something that you really wanted to be involved in. So, mate, nothing to do with me, 100% hats off, full credit to you, and I'm really, really proud to be part of it. Whatever it is moving forward.
Well, I always reckon a good team, it's a good team that makes things happen, mate. And I think you're being a little bit humble about your involvement, because I think there was some direction come from a certain person on my right. With regard to that, but anyway, thank you. But yeah, interesting. And what I will say while you're on that is that we're also definitely. I've got a further meeting on Tuesday. I'm in Perth at the moment, trying to sort out. Mate, I just don't have enough hours in the day, but trying to sort out with. We'll be converting and doing podcasts. So those that have difficulties of sitting there at the screen looking at two little grey-haired men, we will give you the opportunity of having doing it while you're driving, listening while you're driving, whatever the case would be. So I can assure you we'll keep you informed, but yes, we will be providing a podcast format with regard to Property Avenue WA. So, and while I'm on it, before we go to OD, just behind me you can see here, I'm in reverse, I'm trying to work, but see that there? That's our new banner that was done by Prince by Esty. So between one Judy Ann Viner and Prince by Esty, Esty did the drawing down below. We gave her an idea and she put that together. And then between her and then Judy Ann, they put a banner together. And that's now our new logo and our look. And not only that, further to that, one of my meetings yesterday, we will now, rather than have a Champion-based settlement site that everything's going through, which is obviously how it all evolved, Property Avenue WA will have its own Facebook page, and we've already got our own YouTube channel. So there's some interesting things happening. So there's a bit of info with regard to what's been going with episode 20. Mate, What are your thoughts about the week? What's been happening?
Okay, so look, mate, just another big week in WA real estate, and I don't say that just stereotypically for something to say. I'm not selling anything, and I'm not here to pump it up. It just is another big week in WA real estate. So Perth Metro area, 838 sales over the course of the last week. 12 months ago, 562 sales. That comprises all houses, units, and also land. So we also always know that a steady, buoyant market in the Perth Metro area was always 500 to 600 sales a week. It's been that way for a good few years, but we're still at 838 for the week just gone. We did, going back a month and a half ago, we touched 1,000 sales in the week. So that was busy and then some. And so, yes, we have dropped back a little bit, but I absolutely must make this point. That's not because the fizz is going out of the market. It's not because there aren't the buyers around anymore. It absolutely is because the supply of properties available for sale is just not as great as what it was a number of weeks ago. So there's lots of.
I just, sorry to interrupt you. Sorry, can I don't normally like to do that, but just with regard to what you're saying there, one of the points that I know the purpose of Property Overview WA is about WA, but it's also interesting to compare what's going on the East Coast, and obviously I keep an eye on those, and I'm sure you do the same. One of the points about what you're saying about stock is that I read an article where Canberra is going berserk with real estate. One of the issues there was what they were saying was they're having difficulties, people trying to get on. So the bargain hunters, suddenly that bargain hunting was has sort of gone out the door a little bit. So this is Canberra, not WA, okay? But what intrigued me with that article I read and the commentary made by a real estate representative, I think it was, or someone of that nature, was the fact that people were not listing their property because they were concerned that they couldn't get a rental or couldn't buy another property.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely the case. And I think they're probably watching what's happening in the WA market and are taking that lead as well, because our market over here is that right now there's not as many properties for sale. So in terms of listings, we're down to just over 10,000 listings available through Perth. And 12 months ago, that was almost 14,000. So 14,000 was relatively normal, but now we've got a shortage of listings. So I'm certain that there are a number of people that are actually not selling their properties because they don't know what happens next. Either they're going to go and buy another property, but as I just mentioned, the alternative properties are in short supply, or they're going to go and rent a property because they have to have a roof over their head. Now, also, coupled with a very tight sales market is our even more tight rental market. Right now through Perth, the supply of rentals is just over 3,000 properties. 12 months ago, it was 6,500 properties, and it was starting to tighten up at 6,500. So today there's only just over 3,000 available through Perth, and we leased 841 properties last week. So the alternatives for housing, whether renting or selling, those alternatives are just getting fewer, and therefore that is going to affect people's movement decisions. And I dare say that's what's going on in Canberra as well.
Yeah. And I suppose the fact being is with, and it's been well documented with as far as the East Coast, as far as the Prime Minister is concerned, the situation is, hey, they've obviously decided we're just going to let WA do its bit. WA economy is bucking the system as far as what's going on. And you can say what you like, but there's not too many people. In fact, I don't think I've spoken to anybody that's anti-Mark McGowan at the present time. People are going okay. I mean, look, there's no doubt there's some businesses that are doing it tough. Let's not kid ourselves. But at the same time, as far as the field that we're in, I mean, we're both involved in the property world. But that's and at the moment, it's not world record stuff as far as we're concerned, but we're happy with where we're at. so it's interesting what may occur. The other stat that I read was it 4,000 people from Australians still trying to get back into the country on a weekly basis? I think it's something like that. So those people are obviously are not all going to be East Coasters. So if they don't already have a place here, they're going to be looking for something. Perhaps because of the border restrictions, some people are going to turn around and go, hey, we're working in WA, we need to rejig what our living arrangements are. So that, I would suggest, is not going to go away in a hurry. And I've got an example with my brother is a classic. When you compare that, he lives in Singapore, but to come over and see our mum, if he goes via Singapore, he's got a 14-day stay in Singapore, then a 14-day stay in Perth. When I say stay, quarantine. So there's a month that he's got to sort out before he can even see mum. And then he's got a similar situation when he goes back to Singapore. So that's to have leave and come away and do what he needs to do, because his commitment is that's where his work is, in Singapore. But those that don't have that commitment but their work is here, then they would perhaps be reassessing their situation. Obviously, that's driving the market that we've got.
Yeah, mate, look, just I'm glad you brought up that point about Mark McGowan and our state's borders, because that's something that obviously, even in the news yesterday, that was discussed a great deal. And you mentioned that there's not many people out there that are knocking Mark McGowan. I'm aware of a few. I wouldn't say knocking, that's not the right term, but they're not in 100% agreement with the way that he's going about things so far as how it affects our economy. But if we go back, what are we now, September? If we go back to February and March prior to COVID, the year started off economically quite well. That was for real estate, but I think across the board in WA, the year started off quite well. But then COVID came for the first time, and no one knew what that meant, or even knew what the term meant. And we had to learn what life with COVID nationwide, what that looked like. So that was April and May. And then there was a bit of a recovery after that. But I think it's fair to say economically and also in the real estate world, it really did fall off a cliff. Just letting you know. So when we have our normal real estate market, just talking sales, 500 to 600 sales a week. And that's certainly the way that the year started off. And it started to edge up a little bit higher. During that first month of COVID, our worst week of sales activity, it dropped down to 221 sales. So down from 500 to 600, it fell off a cliff and it went down to 221. And that circa 250 number remained for basically the whole period throughout April. It really just fell off a cliff at that point in time. Yep. Since that time, it bounced back. Not to the normal levels of 500 to 600. We've been consistently between 800 and 1,000 sales for 6 or 7 weeks now. So it's rebounded and then some. In contrast, let's have a look at what's happened over in Victoria as an example, where they fell off a cliff, their real estate market, just like ours did in March and April. They also bounced back in May and June, but now they've had this second wave come through. And I don't think that it's fair to say that their market has fallen off a cliff, again, like it did in March and April, but it's not really in April, May. But it's not too far different from that, because people aren't allowed out. People aren't allowed to go to home opens. People aren't allowed to see their banks for money and all that sort of stuff. So there's only so much that the digital world can actually do. And normally when you buy a house, you need to physically see it. So the WA economy is it's almost its own separate country at the moment, because we've got the benefit of not having a concentration of COVID cases and the community transmission. And our economy, we've spoken many times before of the two-speed economy. Well, we're seeing that with WA being
just a minute. Mate, just your speech at the moment just seems to be dropping occasionally. I just letting you know. I don't know whether that's, if someone is viewing this, they want to send us a message, whether you're experiencing, but that's where I'm seeing when I'm talking to you.
Yeah,
sorry, mate.
Even you, mate.
Keep going.
I think I think we've got a bad connection or a bad link, because your face keeps freezing up on my screen as well.
Okay.
But
so it might be just you and me.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so the point being is that the hard border closure that we've got has actually kept our economy very, very healthy. And in fact, I think we've been the only economy in the last quarter that actually achieved any growth throughout the country. And when you look at the areas of the economy that are still struggling, the arts, obviously, they're definitely still struggling. But when you look at tourism, you try to book a place south or anywhere up Kalbarri, Exmouth, Broome, you try and get into any of those spots, and you can't get into some of them till like next year or mid next year. So those are stats that our economy hasn't seen any time in the last few years, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. So there's a lot of merit in Mark McGowan's stance on the hard border closure. And if we didn't have that, and if we had the outbreak, or in fact we may have an outbreak in the future, Victoria is a very good test case as to what our economy might look like.
Yep. Hey, there's been a few little interesting articles in the paper, but throughout the week and beyond, for that matter. And it's interesting when you search through and read different articles. But one article that I did read was about a guy in Tasmania. And I just, for those that are out there, if you're listening now or you're listening later on to this podcast, this stream, if you're buying a property, or for that matter, if you're selling a property, or whatever it is you may be doing with property, and you're dealing with a settlement agent, be it Champion-based settlements, or be it a lawyer, or be it another settlement agency you deal with, what you need to be very, very careful of, and certainly as far as Champion Bay is concerned, we have a policy of not, under any circumstances, providing bank accounts, nor we don't ask clients for bank accounts via email, and we don't send our trust account details or any bank details via email. In fact, we don't even do it by text anymore, because phones are just as bad. But why I make mention about that, and why I think it's so important, while this market is so robust, people are busy, and you and I are certainly having our busy weeks. We get to catch up on Saturday morning, and that's about it at the present time. But why I say that is really, really important. And if you've got a settlement agent or someone, I know I had some work from a lawyer which gave the email had the bank account details, and I contacted that lawyer and said, "Hey, listen, none of my business, but just a thought. We have a policy, and it's something we've been brought out." But this guy received an email. So what they call it's called phishing. So they identify the hackers identify the email. Or they create an email that looks exactly the same. So basically exactly the same. We'll use my business as an example, being Champion-based settlements. So that email Oscar gets from Champion-based settlements, looks like it's from Champion-based settlements. It's identical coming from Tony Viner, and it's telling Oscar to put money into an account. The fact being is those bank account details are not the bank account details of Champion Bay. So if you got an email of that nature, first thing I would be recommending as a buyer or a seller or anybody dealing with property, and you've got to put money into the settlement agent's trust account, I would be confirming that by phone and ringing the settlement agent and talking about it. This guy lost $90,000. And this interesting part about this was that in the article, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, which is ACCC, said Australians lost more than $130 million last year because of email compromise scams. That's massive. And they think that considering that has gone up this last 12 months since then, because there's a fair bit of as I said, a fair bit of activity happening in WA. So if you are doing anything with regard to property, in fact, at any time, but they obviously identify real estate agents, settlement agents, and solicitors because they have trust accounts, etc. And so the scammers are seeing that as a way. And this guy lost his $90,000. He was a first home buyer. His story is a sad story in itself because he was a victim of abuse when he was a young lad. So the money that he had was contributing towards his first home was a payout from the incident that occurred with a minister. And so it was great excitement, a great opportunity. And then suddenly he gets a kick in the guts like that. So it's something you need to be. I can say there is a good side of the story. He did get his money back some 4 weeks later. But can you imagine those 4 weeks where this poor man thought that everything was lost? So it's just something you've got to be really, really careful of.
Yeah, and it's a really hard one to, and this isn't just for our businesses, TV. This is for everyone all the time, because we're in such a digital world these days. Whether it's texting, or whether it's social media, or whether it's email, or whether it's an online portal where everyone's got their different passwords for all the different online portals that you log into these days. So that's just the digital world we live in. Before the digital world, we had this thing called pens and paper, and we used to write things on them and deliver them to the people that we needed to get them to.
Yeah.
And you know what? Whilst we're laughing about it right now, whilst things weren't as efficient back then, there was a lot less scams, and there was a lot less problems, and the problems that we're talking about, whether in our businesses or with anyone in normal life, because even still to this day, the best, most secure method of changing bank account details or supplying bank account details, for example, the most secure method is for you to write it down and hand deliver it to the place that it needs to get to. Like, that's the best way to do it, but that's not an efficient way to operate in the digital world. So what's the answer with regard to, a policy? Because everyone, it just happens. No matter how secure or safe you try to be, someone needs your bank details, or some website requires you to enter in your bank details, and lots of people are very reluctant to do it. Often that means that you need to talk to someone on the phone. Well, how do you know who you're talking to? Everyone that you talk to these days, they say, well, hang on, before we go any further, we need you to identify yourself. And my response to that is, well, hang on, why don't you identify yourself? I need to know who I'm talking to. So it's a real difficult thing. And from a business point of view, it is, well, hang on, all the staff, all the team members, all the settlement agents, they also need to have some form of a paper trail, so that if there is any dispute as to, well, what was the right account number, or what did you tell me on the phone, then it needs to be in writing somewhere, in case, there was an inaccuracy, if there was some sort of a mistake. But that whole stuff, having the paper trail or having it in writing, is the risk that we're talking about, in it falling into the wrong hands. So what's the absolute right answer or the solution? Probably going back to the way that we did it, where we have a pen and paper and we hand deliver things, but that's not all that practical in our digital world. So I don't know what the absolute secure solution is.
Mate, I will let you know, one of our followers, in fact, one of our guests from Aviso WA insurance group, one Justin Collins, he has just sent a message to say hello, and he is telling us it's currently 27 in Broome at the present time. Seriously, we don't care, JC.
I wonder what time is it in Broome? What time?
Because?
What time
is it in Broome? Oh, I don't know. It's probably the same as what ours is. But he made mention, and I've done a little thing there. Cyber protection is something that he would love to have a talk about at some point. So we'll get JC on and have that as a discussion point when he gets back from his little rendezvous in Broome. We come back all suntan and looking $1 million. So he and 30,000 others. So the time is coffee o'clock, he told me.
Coffee o'clock. Well, you're not really in Broome. You should be on Broome time, and that means you can be drinking anything you like.
Yeah, absolutely. So we refer back to the cybercrime, which we've just covered, and the scam. But another point that I wouldn't mind discussing, and you with your background and qualifications in this field, the auctions. We're talking about what's going on in the property world, and auctions are, you see that sort of certainly pushed a fair bit over the East Coast. You pick up any of the real estate lift outs, etc. We over on the East Coast, and there's a lot of talk about what's going on with the auction market, and so it goes. In WA, how does that go? I suppose first things first is how does the auction world go in WA, and then perhaps you could extend on how an auction works.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not an expert in auctions. I've got my license, and I'm very passionate about them and have had some experience, and also some very good training from some very good trainers. But I'm not Mr. Auctioneer or anything like that. But I know a few that are. What was I going to say? The way that auctions work in WA, or the way that our real estate market in WA and auctions work, is the complete opposite of the eastern states, or rather Melbourne and Sydney. So in Victoria and New South Wales, everything is sold by auction, but then the exceptions are private treaty, like when you actually stick a price on something. But other than that, auctions dominate the market over there. In our market over here, we put prices on things, and that dominates what happens in our marketplace. And the exception is the no price method or the auction method. So I don't know why, it's just always been that way. And for as long as I've been in real estate, everyone always says auctions don't work in WA. It's just one of those stigmas that has never actually left WA.
Yeah.
That said, the statistics actually challenge the stigma, and auctions have become far more popular in WA over the last 10 years. Over the last 3 or 4 years, there's a new, probably not that long, over the last 2 to 3 years, there's a new system which is effectively an online auction, which is known as open negotiation. And that basically is what I just said. It's an online auction. So you're not standing there on site trying to buy the property on the day. You would have seen the property maybe a couple of times, and then you're bidding for the property online via an online auction system. I went for a walk with a very good mate of mine this morning who has been in real estate for must be 25 years. He's a licensed auctioneer, and he's one of Perth's best real estate people. And in the last 3 or 4 months, maybe the last 6 months, he's started to use this open negotiation system. And he told me his stats this morning, and in the last 3 months, I think it is, maybe 4, he's run 17 open negotiation auction campaigns. And of those 17, he sold 16 of them under the auction conditions. So there's only one that hasn't yet sold, and I guess he's dealing on that. But 16 out of 17, which is effectively an online auction, gives you a very good indication as to whether auctions actually do work in WA. Bottom line from my end, Tony, is that I think that's the first time I've ever called you Tony. But the bottom line...
We're getting very formal.
Yeah, bottom line from my end, TV, auctions in WA absolutely do work if they're done right. Often they're not. They're not promoted correctly. The sellers haven't got the awareness that they need to of the process, and the buyers haven't got the conditioning of what they need to do to buy the property. But I believe that they absolutely do work in WA, and I think they are becoming a lot more common, whether it be the traditional live on-site auction or certainly a web-based or an online auction. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, and the other thing about auctions that I have picked up on at times that, and I don't know what's going on in the current market as such, whether this, but certainly I've had scenarios where clients of mine have, for example, going to sell by auction. However, someone comes along and buys before it even gets to that point. And then, of course, you've got the other side of it where they go to auction. It's exposed. There's people there. It doesn't get sold at auction, but all of a sudden it opens up opportunity to sell after auction. Then where people, be it someone may have bid but they've not got to the sale price, the asking price, and then the negotiations are done with that bidder after auction. And so from my observation, I've seen it, but yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's it's interesting, hence why I asked the question today, because there is a bit of a stigma about it, and you don't hear a lot about it, and it's not promoted as you highlighted, perhaps as it is. Pick up any Eastern States paper, and there's just, it's all about what happened with auctions for the week, or the auctions for the weekend. So it's interesting. Yeah. John Harvey, who's a retired real estate person, who's now in Mandurah, he made mention, he's just said, hello, Harves, good to hear from you. Open negotiation is the best way to auction a property, and he's had some experience in that field and done a few auctions in his time when he was a working man. He's probably sipping coffee as well. But so interesting to get that perspective. And Dino Stonehouse, our regular, I caught up with Dino yesterday. We had a chat about a few things, and he did ask the question about open negotiation, but he's just come back to us and said OD's already answered the question. So you beat him to it. So thanks, guys. Good to hear from you. Any other questions people have got, you're welcome to ask them. They may not be about the topic we're talking about, but please ask, and we will try and discover the answers. So there you go.
John,
keep going.
I was just quickly, John Harvey's been around the block many times as a real estate agent and also an auctioneer as well. And I know a number of auctioneers, and I don't know any of them that think open negotiation is not a good system. It's a very, very good, transparent system. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that on-site auctions don't work, because they still work. And I know of a number of auctions happening today on-site, but the online auction system really does work, so long as people are educated, both the sellers and the buyers as well.
Mate, just quickly, and a question without notice. When we talk about the market at the moment, where are we going with prices? Is there much discounting happening with the asking price, or the value's going up a little, or where are we at? Have you got any information on that? So what your observation is in that area at the moment?
I can give you my observation, but I can't give you data, because I don't think that the data has actually the data hasn't been released yet, but I can give you my observations with the real estate agents that I deal with day to day in terms of the salespeople, and also even closer, I'm a lot closer to the rental market and the leasing people, and what's happening with properties that are available for lease. Both of them, both the sales and leasing market, there's short supply, there's high demand. And for the sale properties, there's multiple offers coming in, which often will result in an upward pressure on price, or sometimes actually achieving greater than the asking price. And that's exactly the same in the leasing market as well. Multiple applications coming in on the one property, and often in order to get to be successful in leasing the property, people will offer $10 a week, $20 a week. And we had one during the week that was $40 a week greater than the asking price, just to secure it, because they know that if they don't secure that property, there's very few options around. So whilst the data isn't out yet to suggest that there are price increases, I'm certain that when the next quarter's data is released, it absolutely will show price growth, both in the selling market, but also in the rental market.
Hey, Dino has just come back to getting back to open negotiation. When we do open negotiation, can the buyer's offer, can their offer be a subject to finance? Because normally that's the other thing people may not be aware of with auctions. You've basically to have your finance up and running. You've got to provide a deposit of 10%, unless you can negotiate with the auctioneer prior. Question asked is open negotiation. Can the buyer offer to buy but be subject to finance?
Yeah, so they absolutely can, and in fact, and TB, whilst it's not traditional, you can actually buy subject to finance in the traditional live on-site auction as well. But in regard to the open negotiation, you can have any number of conditions on an offer. And all your conditions on whatever your offer is going to be need to be approved prior to you starting to bid on the property. So part of the open negotiation process is that any conditions that you require on the offer, which would include finance, those conditions need to be submitted and accepted by the owner before you even start talking about price. And then only after those conditions are accepted do you then start to bid on the property and work out the last remaining item, and that is, so what's going to be the price based on your conditions. But always remembering that the cleaner or simpler your offer is, improves your negotiation position. So if you said that that it's going to be subject to finance, that's fine, because many offers are going to be subject to finance. But if you said it had to be vacant possession and you knew that there was a tenant in there for 12 months, or if there were other conditions like a building inspection report, or the other conditions that people can put on an offer that makes the offer a bit more challenging to get accepted, then a seller might be looking at your deal that's got 4 conditions on there versus looking at someone else that's got their finance already sorted out, so therefore less conditions. And if they're able to achieve the price with a less condition offer, then obviously it's in their best interest to do that. So the more conditions makes it harder, but you can put whatever conditions you want on there, so long as that's going to be acceptable by the seller.
One other quick thank you for that. Just sorry, I'm being a bit distracted because I'm just checking something else. One of the things that I had changing the subject again, I've had a couple of queries, quite complicated matters, with regard to encroachment. So people have got their property trying to sell, or maybe in one case where the boundary fence had to be repaired after the storms, and it was realised. And so a boundary encroachment is where you or your neighbour, let's say in this case, Oscar's, if you're looking at the screen now, Oscar's boundary, if you like, is encroaching. So the fence, in actual fact, is exceeding. Yes, so that line there, your boundary has gone beyond that line that Oscar's pointing to, and in fact, you've got property. So my little sign down here, Property Avenue WA, that's part of Oscar's garage, but it's in my property. That's called an encroachment. And so that can cause a lot of grief, and it can cause some serious problems, because if TV, who is the adjoining neighbour, is not a happy budgie, and doesn't see eye to eye with one Oscar D'Souza, then that can be difficult with regard to the process. But it's got to be resolved. And there was a terrible case that I again read during the week, whereby let me quickly find it. The building was built so close to the boundary of the adjoining property that the roof and the guttering is literally touching the adjoining property. Now, that shouldn't happen. It was a new home. We're not talking about something that someone bought. They had this home built. And, of course, why I touch on this subject is because in this current climate where it's busy, people are buying land, people are wanting building, and we've seen articles in the paper where our builders here in WA are looking for eastern states tradespeople because everyone's just run off their feet, and we can't get enough workers to keep up with demand. And of course, there's a time frame for these things to be done. So I'm not suggesting, please do not get me wrong, that I'm suggesting there is a problem with our building fraternity, but we all make mistakes. And that's not just the builders, that's including people that are rubber stamping these approvals, because everyone's under pressure trying to get the approvals through the system. But this scenario occurred. This scenario is not uncommon, or things of this nature are not uncommon, but it's something you need to be very, very careful of. And as an owner, it gets back to buyer beware. And if you're the owner of the property or buying the property, you can blame all the people you like, but at the end of the day, I mean, this shouldn't have happened. And of course, perhaps if the builder needs to answer some questions, it'd be obvious that, hang on, we've got this place rubbing next door. So there's got to be some questions there. But of course, as in these cases like this, everyone ducks for cover. You've got to ask the council when they've approved it. Apparently, reading the article further, it makes mention that these people got their plans approved, But then it was realised that the way the plans were drawn up and the way the building was going to be constructed, the home wasn't going to sit on the property that way. So they basically switched the plans. They did a mirror image and turned them over the other way. And away they went, built the home until they got to the point of the roof touching the other. And now these poor people can't move into their property and no one is taking responsibility. And, of course, there's no insurance.
Yeah. Hey, that's look, encroachment is a really, really messy, such a messy area. It's uncomfortable for everyone, and there's no straight answers because, like you say, mate, it's everyone does duck for cover, whether it's the land developer, whether it's the builder, whether it's the surveyor, whether it's the settlement agent, whether it's the valuer. You know, no one wants responsibility, and just trying to work out who is responsible, even when you get a solicitor to try and work out who's responsible, mate. It's such a it's a very, very painful topic. I saw, not last week, I think it might have been the week before, I saw on the news in downtown Ellenbrook here in the Perth metropolitan area that there was a particular part of the subdivision that it must have been a big hill before it was subdivided into blocks. And if you can imagine, on one side, so where's my hands on this screen? So yep. on this side, you've got like the low side of the block. So you've got yes. all houses down this side. And on this side, on the back end, like on their back fence, you've got blocks that are up here.
Yes.
So
yes.
big retaining wall that basically goes down here. And yep. I think that was something like a 3 meter, maybe between 3 and 4 meter retaining wall. Now that yep. exists on the back of the person in question. That exists on their back boundary fence, and there's a row of houses that go along there alongside them. And on their back fence, there's another row of houses that go alongside them, but they're about 4 meters above where these people are. Now, that big, giant limestone retaining wall is unstable. And with what I saw the footage on the news, has literally crumbled, fallen down into someone else's backyard, into their pool area. It's now a complete hazard over there in terms of a building hazard. And so these people's backyard, 95% of their backyard has had to be fenced off until that retaining wall gets fixed. Now, the news story was all about, well, whose responsibility is it? Like, where does that retaining wall sit? Does it sit equally on the boundary? And should it be on the people that are on the higher side of the block or on the lower side of the block? Is it the land developer's problem? Did the surveyor survey the land properly? And there's all these different questions that have been had. And it's not just that one person's backyard. The next person, you can see that their wall's starting to crumble as well. So this is a very systemic and structural problem that right now today, these people are sitting there with an unsafe property because they've got a massive retaining wall that has come down into their backyard and pool area, and there's no one willing to accept the responsibility for the cleanup. So very, very messy situation. I'm sure we will hear a lot more about how that situation uncovers. But again, everyone's ducking for cover. No one wants to accept responsibility. And these poor people are sitting there with a big pile of limestone rubble in their backyard where their pool used to be. So yep. It's prevalent.
Yep, and it's one that I did contact Sandy Wormald from Title Insurance because Sandy's got to go through a few hoops before she's able to come on board as a guest, and love to have her on as a guest because she's a great person and would be really interesting to listen to as far as, you know, what title insurance is about, but some of the cases that they have been they've assisted people with here in WA, and well, not just WA, but some of the cases that they sort of cover. But I did ask Sandy with regard to the situations of that nature, and as she pointed out with title insurance really is something that I know when I first became aware of title insurance, I was a bit skeptical and thinking, oh, you know, it's another form of insurance. What do we need that for? You know, and that was an element of ignorance, to be honest. But being in the industry I'm in, and certainly champion-based settlements, and now we've had a number of clients who have benefit out of having title insurance, and of course we've seen other clients a similar story to what you're just talking about retaining walls and on an escarpment. And unfortunately, the clients didn't have title insurance and would have helped their cause. But what I'm wanting to make mention about is when I checked with Sandy, as she pointed out, title insurance would and that housing scenario with that, how about the gutters and the roofing touching the neighbour. Title insurance doesn't cover that situation because that's it's not something that they've inherited. It's something that's it's a scenario that's occurred there and then. So title insurance covers something if you buy a property and we suddenly find there's 3 metres of boundary encroaching the neighbour, and we've got to resolve it. And you've got to get surveyors, you've got to get valuers in, you need a settlement agent, you've got to get a value. Did I say value? I think I did. And then you may have to negotiate with the neighbour as far as the price is concerned, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a range of things that got to be done. It can be a very, very expensive exercise. But so title insurance doesn't cover for an existing or a new event, but it does cover for something that you've inherited. So, but we'll definitely try and discuss that further and have that as a separate topic in its own right, which we could probably combine that with boundary encroachments as a topic, because it is relative. And I'd say to any of the people out there who are looking at going to buy this weekend or at any stage, certainly be aware of that. And certainly if you've got any doubts, you've got any questions, or you want to clarify something of that nature, there are some ways of perhaps ensuring that's all tickety-boo. And someone like myself at Champion Bay or Property Avenue WA, you can contact us for some direction if you need any direction as far as that side is concerned. But I would suggest that it is something that don't just take it for granted, and that includes while you're building. So, mate, there's a few things we want to cover, but will, as I said, we will have that topic in its own right once we get some clearance. The other thing that I wanted to raise, what I want to do, I think it's important, Oscars RANT. I think we should have a little section called Oscars RANT, and I think this week is none better than this week because I actually saw a little post and it was property related. Please go on.
Mate, okay, so I put something on my social media during the week, and as you know, I'm an early riser, and this thing popped into my head, and I thought, I just want to tell the world about it, so social media is a good way to do it. And it revolves around our country's reaction and strategy towards COVID, and that is we're all in this together. So when COVID first happened, there was a moratorium put on evictions for those people that are renting houses to make sure that everyone had a roof on over their head, which is great strategy. Similarly, the banks came to the party. They weren't under pressure or duress, but the banks came to the party and basically said, okay, well, if that's what's going to happen with the tenants, we're going to assist our customers by providing mortgage repayment deferments or loan holidays, whatever it is. But we're going to try and ease some of the pressure off our people that have got mortgages as well, which, again, that's a really, really good measure. But we're approaching the end of the emergency period, which is the 29th of September. So in about 4 weeks' time, I think it is, three to 4 weeks' time. And it certainly is under review as to what our state government is going to do so far as our state emergency period and how that's going to impact on the rental market or in particular renters. Because right now, as at 29th of September, from the 30th of September, it goes back to the old rules. And if tenants aren't doing the right thing, there's not going to be a moratorium on evictions anymore, which means you can evict tenants if they're not paying rent, etc. I suspect that might change in terms of the government extending the moratorium in some form, but we're yet to see what that's going to look like. That all said, though, there's no moratorium on mortgages no moratorium on repossessions. And I know for a fact that the bank's tolerance of holiday periods or mortgage repayment holiday periods and all those kinds of leniencies during this time, that's going to draw to a close very quickly. Some of them will happen by the end of the year. I think CBA said January or something next year, which means that those that have been adversely affected by COVID and are struggling with mortgage repayments, the whole idea of that's okay, we'll help you out, that has to stop from the bank's point of view. And so therefore we are absolutely going to see an increase in bank repossessions if people are not be able to keep up with their mortgage repayments. So unless the government steps in, unless there is some other measure put in place, we're absolutely not all in this together. I believe the tenants will be benefiter, if that's a word, of the government looking after the tenants from the tenant's point of view. But from the landlord's point of view, or from the mortgage holder's point of view, I think that there's not going to be the protection that there needs. And so therefore we might see, people that have been paying mortgages, they might end up losing their houses. They're going to need a roof over their head as well. The whole we're all in this together thing, I love that, I respect that, and I'm a big team player. I just think there needs to be a one size fits all for everyone who needs a roof over their head, because right now I don't think it's equally weighted.
Yeah, look, and when I saw what you'd posted, I didn't comment at the time because I thought, oh, you know what, I'm going to take that opportunity because I thought it was relative. I reckon it's a really good point. I will defend my experience, if you like, as far as the bank's concerned, and it's interesting we're talking earlier on about options and open negotiations. I think this is a point where if you got any concerns with regard to where you're at, rather than burying your head in the sand or getting concerned about all this and stressing, the first thing I'd be doing is contacting a Dean Stonehouse or contacting a Jordan Ralph or contacting a finance broker of some sort, or your bank manager, be it whoever it may be. But I would be certainly going and talking to them with regard to your concerns and seeing what you can do, because I'm also been aware, and I get what you're saying, and as I said, when I read it, I went, wow, I like his thinking, because there's been no shortage of documentation or talk, commentary about this situation and what's going on in the world, in Australia, and in particular, businesses failing and rah-de-rah and people going, and it's not just talk. It's a fact. But I think that the first thing I would be recommending, and I say this with a lending background, is go and talk to your bank, go and talk to your finance broker, go and talk to your financial planner, whoever it may be, whichever one it may be. It may be your accountant, and assessing how we're going to go about this, and then things can be negotiated.
This is a really important point, mate, and this is the end of my rant. The way that the setup is at the moment, and I applaud the government for their reaction to COVID. It's brilliant. All I'm saying is there needs to be a bit of a shift of thinking for this housing or roof over your idea, because right now it's not evenly balanced. The way that the support measures are in place at the moment is, if you are a mortgage holder and you live in your own house and you've got a mortgage, and at some point in time pretty soon, the banks aren't going to be as lenient anymore, because let's face it, they've got shareholders and they need to do what's right for the shareholders. The government needs to do what's right for the people. So when it comes time to those mortgage holders, the banks eventually are going to say, look, sorry you've lost your job, sorry COVID's affected your business, all that sort of stuff, but you're not keeping up with your mortgage repayments, so unfortunately we're going to need to repossess your house. That sounds pretty brutal, but that's reality. That's exactly what is going to be happening, and we're going to see a lot of that over the course of next year, unless there's some measure put in place. On the flip side, if you are an investment property owner, so if you're a landlord and you've got a mortgage, if the bank decides, if you aren't able to, if you've got a tenant in there and the tenant's not paying rent because they've lost their job, they're protected by this moratorium eviction. But if you relied on that rent as the landlord to pay your mortgage, and then the bank says, well, we're not going to be nice to you anymore. You don't have the rental income coming in. You therefore can't pay your mortgage. At some point in time, we're not going to be nice to you anymore because we've got shareholders. So we're going to repossess the house. That means the landlord loses their house. But even the banks, with the legislation in place at the moment, even the banks aren't allowed to evict those tenants during the emergency period.
Yeah. Yep.
Landlord loses their house, they weren't getting any rent for it anyway, but the tenant is actually protected by this moratorium on evictions because the government needs to do the right thing by the people. So I'm not saying that shouldn't happen for the tenants, because I agree that everyone needs a roof over their head, but it needs to be a one-size-fits-all, and it's not that way at the moment.
Yep. No, and I get where you're coming from, and hence why I questioned with you to say, hey mate, this is what I'd like to do, and I think it's a good little. I think we might have that as a bit of a regular thing. We might have a little Oscars rant. We might have a TV's rant at some stage. But yeah, I love it, and I like your thinking. I totally agree. I think it's a fabulous thing. Hey, listen, I can't believe I thought a bit like last week. We've just sort of covered some great topics, and really enjoyed it. But tomorrow's Father's Day. And I don't know about you, but I always enjoy the day. Would you believe neither of us, sadly, do we have our dads with us anymore? And in fact, tomorrow, would you believe, in my case, it's 2 years to the day that my dear dad passed away. So it's a day that I'll certainly, yeah, I know, just seems to be amazing. But it's a day that I'll celebrate. But also at the same time, we've both experienced in the last week or two some sad scenarios with regard to Anu, certainly, and I, not directly, but through friends of mine, very close friends of mine. And it's those things, as much as we're the lucky ones to be able to share with our kids and all that. But there is some situations that we put our hearts and thoughts out to those people, which highlights, OD, in my opinion, and what we've discussed previously, it highlights the fact that we talk about property and we talk about encroachments and we talk about all this thing. But seriously, we've got to get some of these things in perspective too, don't we? I mean, tomorrow, today, whenever it else may be, there are some pretty important things in life other than just property.
Mate, yeah, we did discuss that off air, and for the reasons that you mentioned before, in terms of loss of life that we've been aware of just over the last few days, in fact. So yeah, look, we're passionate about real estate, and there's lots of people are as well, but let's keep real estate in perspective of the broader picture, which is life, and make sure that it doesn't, unless it's your absolute passion and there's no other passion in your life, then yep, real estate, you're like, go for it whole hog. But I really believe that there's a lot more to life other than real estate, and that largely is your family, whatever your family looks like. So make sure that you keep real estate in perspective. We're always going to be talking about it because we love real estate, but we love our family life, and we love those around us a lot more as well. So when you're not finding us on this little screen here, we'll be with our families. TV, you mentioned something about people out buying houses and all that sort of stuff, over the weekend. I would hope that people can be buying houses today, but keep tomorrow for being with your family. And if you're fortunate enough to have your dad around, spend some really good quality time with him, because don't go buy. I know real estate agents that most of them aren't going to be on the road tomorrow anyway, because there's not going to be many buyers around. So spend time with your family. Those are the bits that count, and real estate will be there on Monday.
Absolutely. And to finish off on that note, because as I said, we're going really well again this week. We just love it. We love what we're doing. But the other thing being is we've got to have an if question. And my if question is, we got a lovely Dino. In fact, we talk about that. Dino is off to a funeral this morning because, as I said, I caught up with him yesterday, and he just said, "Happy Father's Day for tomorrow, TV and OD." So thanks, mate. We appreciate it. Thank you. A quick if question. I've got to ask it. If when you were a little boy, your dear dad gave you $20 to spend, what would you spend it on?
$20 when I was little. How little?
Whatever age you want to be. Dad gives you $20 when you're a young tacker. You could be 10, you could be 15, you could be. I don't care really. I just thought I'd pluck that question out of the sky.
Mate, I didn't have a very good head on my shoulders. I wasn't thinking spend some, save some, or anything like that. If I got $20, that would have been me winning the lottery when I was a young. I can only think that I would have gone and bought. I used to be a fan of the little Matchbox cars. So all I could think is I would buy as many of those Matchbox cars as I could with my $20, and I'd bring them home and I would play with them for probably an hour. But I had this really unusual period of my life when I was a young guy, and I like to have a look at these cars, what they'd look like when they had an accident. So after I play with the cars for an hour, I'd go out the back with a brick and I'd beat the shit out of them, mate. And then so that's what I do with my $20. I'd buy cars and then I'd beat the shit out of the cars.
Oh, no.
What did you do with your $20?
Well, I was a bit of a phantom man, so I definitely would have got a few comics. And then, of course, nothing's changed. I definitely would have gone and bought a new cricket ball or a new, would have been something sporty for sure, be it a football or be it a set of wickets or whatever. I mean, $20 I might add when I was a young tacker sort of went a fair way. But I must admit I had an auntie who was sort of like my grandmother. So we'd go to church, and the first thing she did was give us $5 or $10 sometimes, and we went into Rock's News Agency, which used to be a news agency in Geraldton, a very well-known landmark. And boy, did they have an array of comics. So that probably got a fair whack. And of course, let's be honest, every kid loves lollies. So we used to spend a bit of a batch on that. But I like your story better. It's been another great week. I've really enjoyed the show. We do apologise for those that perhaps trying to listen or watch, and we've exceeded our timeframes. But we just love doing what we're doing. We enjoy the fact that you join us. If you're watching later or you're watching now or whenever it is you do, thanks a million. Keep joining us. We will give you more info with regard to our YouTube and our podcasting. And you never know, we may have some exciting news down the track. It could just be another dimension to Property Avenue WA, but who knows? Life's different. Mate, thanks a million. Have a great day tomorrow, and all the dads and all the granddads out there, have a fabulous time. We really appreciate everything. Please stay safe and have a fun time. Take care. Hey, go. Oh, what have I done?